My name is Taylor Rose. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're talking about all the books that I read in May. So I only ended up getting through 5 books, which in the scheme of things isn't really a lot, but I finished them and that's what counts. So let's go over the books that I did read and then we'll talk about the books that I'm planning on reading for June. The first book I finished was Crier's War by Nina Varela. I initially started reading it actually in April, could not get into it, and switched to a different book. I decided that I really needed to finish it. I'm not really good at DNFing books unless they're absolutely abysmal, and you're gonna see just how much I can torture myself in a few books. A quick synopsis. Impossible love between two girls, one human, one maid. A love that could birth a revolution. After the War of Kinds ravaged the kingdom of Rabu, the Atome, designed to be the playthings of royals, took over the estates of their owners and bent the human race to their will. Now Ayla, a human servant rising the ranks at the house of the sovereign, dreams of avenging the death of her family by killing the sovereign's daughter, Lady Crier. Crier, who was made to be beautiful, to be flawless, and to take over the work of her father. Crier had been preparing to do just that, to inherit her father's rule over the land. But that was before she was betrothed to Sire Keenock, who seems to have 1,000 secrets. That was before she discovered her father isn't as benevolent as she thought. That was before she met Ayla. My biggest issues with this book were I did not like Ayla as a character at all. And I'll try not to be spoilery. It'll be a little difficult going into the second book, but I just felt like she had good reason to feel the way that she did about things that were happening. But I didn't believe her feelings, really. She frequently forgets things that are supposed to be important to her that I don't think realistically she would forget in these scenarios. For example, she has a best friend at one point. She just forgets he exists, basically, and then is surprised when he's brought back up. I thought this guy is supposed to be your one and only friend, but okay. The consequences were also pretty vague. Humans are being oppressed by the Atome, but the effects of that weren't really tangible. Obviously, the main humans that we follow are like, don't do that or you'll get punished, and a few people are killed. But arguably, they aren't being killed as a direct result of the Atome being in power. They're killed for the machinations of one specific person, if that makes sense. The life they described being under the Atome as so horrible is literally just how poor people have always been treated in history, like peasants and stuff. So it just felt pretty vague in terms of like why what's going on was bad. Arguably, there was probably not a difference between how humans are treated currently in this world to how they were treated underneath royal humans. I would have liked to see the world building around that aspect in particular expanded on so we could see real examples other than, oh no, we're servants and do work. Unfortunately, that is a reality for the majority of humans throughout time. So consequently, the tension felt kind of low stakes through the whole book. Nothing bad really ever happened to the main characters. Bad things happened, but then almost immediately were solved or brushed over for whatever reason. And I think that's why I had such a hard time getting into it initially. But the audiobook was a really nice experience. I liked the narrator. I did not like how she used the same voice for Ayla and Crier. They're supposed to be two very different people. One's a robot, essentially, and they had identical voices. So it was hard to tell whose chapter you were supposed to be in. And not that that's so important. Obviously, you're listening, so you should be getting all the context clues. But as listening experience, narrators that do a better job at delineating people with their voice, I think are much better listening experience. That being said, the things that I really enjoyed were there are folktales sprinkled throughout, which I felt gave a lot of interesting cultural world building for the people, the humans. Crier's point of view was really cute, even though she was kind of wishy-washy. I felt like she wasn't very strong as a character, but it's the first book and it's supposed to be her building up to being determined and stuff. I enjoyed reading her chapters way more than I enjoyed reading Ayla's chapters. Overall, I gave it 3 stars. It was an okay read. It was fine. I didn't dislike it, but I didn't really love it or anything. And that may have to do with it being more of a YA book. If you're into the genre, I don't think it would be a waste for you to at least try reading it. So after Crier's War, I did follow up with the sequel, Ironheart. Synopsis. For too long, Atome have lorded over the kingdom of Rabu, oppressing its human citizens. But the human revolution has risen, and at its heart is Ayla. Once a handmaiden, now a fugitive, Ayla narrowly escaped the palace of Lady Crier, the girl she would have killed if she hadn't fallen in love first. Now Ayla has pledged her allegiance to Queen Jun, who can help accomplish the human rebellion's ultimate goal, destroy the Ironheart. Without its power, the Atoma will be weakened to the point of extinction. Ayla wants to succeed, but can't shake the strong feeling she's developed for Crier. And unbeknownst to her, Crier has also fled the palace, taking up among traveling rebels determined to find and protect Ayla. Even as their paths collide, nothing can prepare them for the dark secret underlying the Ironheart. So stop here if you don't want spoilers on how this series ends. Let's start with things I liked. So the romance was much more believable in this book, but I still didn't like Ayla, unfortunately. The fluff was actually really cute though. Started to feel it. However, ultimately, Ayla constantly will, out of nowhere, start berating herself for having certain thoughts when there's no evidence that she even had these thoughts to begin with. In the first book, you went chapters of her thinking, I hate Crier. Crier is horrible. Crier represents everything wrong with the world. Crier sucks. I hate Crier. And then in this book, she's like, I can't believe I'm thinking positive things about Crier. And it's like, well, where were the positive things about Crier? You never thought positive things about Crier, other than, oh, she's beautiful. That's not a reason to get to know Crier, arguably. Crier finally gets a backbone and does some stuff, but the biggest issue with this book is that everything important happens off page. Other people are doing all the important stuff. We're following Crier and Ayla, who arguably do the least. They do the least to save the world. Why are we following them? The first book, I didn't really have an issue. This book really would have benefited from having POV from other characters. So, kind of like how One Dark Window, Two Twisted Crowns, that duology, the second book had twice as many point of views. Instead of just the guy and the girl, it had the guy's BFF and the girl's BFF, giving you multiple perspectives on everything that was happening. If we had followed Storm, if we had followed Queen Jun, we would have gotten so much more out of the story than all these problems being solved so conveniently. Anytime Ayla or Crier was in trouble, either they saved each other, which that's fine, or someone just swooped out of the left field and fixed the problem for them. I don't want to spoil it, but at a certain point, they think, oh no, this is the end. We're gonna die here. And then, whoop, in comes this side character who you had absolutely zero indication was even doing anything about this. A. B. Knew where they were. He swoops in and is like, I found you. And it's like, how did you know we were here? We weren't supposed to be here. And you, I guess, are psychic. I don't know. I guess the argument could be someone who helped them get to that point told him. But reading it, you just think like, oh, yet again, all their problems are solved by a third party who we don't follow. And I felt that ultimately the antagonist's motivation was conveyed poorly. Let's just say the bad guy and the good guys wanted the same thing. And it wasn't really conveyed very well why that would help him. Yes, if X happened, he would get Y result. But there's a Z consequence that I felt absolutely negated the benefit of Y happening. If that makes sense. I'm trying not to spoil it, which, I don't know. Is anyone going to read it based off this review? Probably not. Reading it wasn't bad. It didn't grab me in the heart at all. And I didn't feel, like, stressed, really, about anything happening. This one was easier for me to read the ebook, so I did ditch the audiobook halfway through, because it is faster for me to read physically. I did end up giving this, I downgraded it to 2.5 stars. The lack of alternate POVs really hurt the plot. It's like you're following a businessman, but instead of following the businessman, you're following his janitor, and then wondering why you don't actually understand any of the business side going on. The third book that I read was King of Envy by Anna Huang, and I posted a 2-hour review of this book because it was the worst experience I've had in a while. It is essentially a billionaire romance, forced proximity sort of mafia adjacent. He's not in the mafia or a mafia-like entity, but he does things that usually happen in mafia books. So, the synopsis for this. Vuk Markovic is notorious for shunning human interactions. The scarred billionaire rarely talks, and he has no interest in relationships outside his small but trusted circle. His only exception? Her. The beauty to his beast, the object of his obsession. He saw her first. He wanted her first. But now, she's engaged to his oldest friend. And the closer the wedding looms, the more he's torn between loyalty and desire. She should be his, and he might just risk it all to have her. To the world, supermodel Ayana Kidane leads the perfect life. Her career has skyrocketed, and she's engaged to one of New York's most eligible bachelors. What people don't know is that the engagement is only a business arrangement. He gets his inheritance when they marry. She gets the money she needs to leave her abusive agency. Pretending to be in love should be easy, until she finds herself increasingly drawn to her fiancé's enigmatic best man. Vuk thrills and terrifies her in equal measure. She knows she should stay away, but when her wedding is thrown into chaos, he's the only person she finds comfort in, until his past catches up with them and threatens everything they love. So I was tricked into reading this by threads that said there would be a scene where he cuts open his mouth. And forgive me, I was just really curious how that would go down. It's not in the book. There were like 7 comments saying, this is the book, this is the book. It's not in the book. Maybe the current version on Kindle Unlimited is different than what they read. But I don't know. Very upsetting for me because I wasted my weekend suffering through this. It was just terrible all around, right? Obviously, this is like a series of romance novels, so each book also introduced the protagonists for the next book. Every single scene with the protagonist for the next book, King of Gluttony, Maya, was way better, more descriptive, more developed, funnier than anything with the actual main characters of this book. There was way too much telling. It was like every chapter began with a summary of what happened since the end of the last chapter. So it would just be a summary of like a week and a half where they never met. You're telling me they met like 6 times over the course of 4 months and all of a sudden they're just like dying to be together? I don't buy it. Also, the character histories do not line up. Repeatedly, Vuk says 13 years ago, and it's like somehow he went to college, became friends with his roommate, was forced into a gang, made drugs for the gang for 2 years, graduates from college, starts his business. All of this happened somehow exactly 13 years ago. And it would be one thing if it said around 13 years ago, but it would say 13 years explicitly. I just couldn't get over it. And it also wasn't really implied anything about Ayana other than 6 years ago she went to New York City. Okay, how old is she? You know, because either this is a 35-year-old man lusting after a girl in her early 20s, or it's 2 peers. And I can tell you which story I would prefer. The characters were just kind of very cardboardy. Like, we're supposed to believe that Vuk has this heart of gold when everyone is scared of him. All he does is be angry. There's like one chapter where he spends quality time with his BFF for life, Jordan. And Ayana is supposedly obsessed with perfume. It's mentioned like twice, and she doesn't even talk about scents really. She talks about the scent once in detail to like make a parallel between Vuk and the scent she buys him. Okay, why isn't scent an integral part of her character? And I guess they get away with that by being like, she only buys perfumes when she travels for the memories. But like, she doesn't use these perfumes. She doesn't have other interest in scents like candles or anything. It just felt like a little backdrop tool. She talks about how much she works out. She says she goes to kickboxing once, and then talks about how she works out all the time to stay fit for being a model. That's clearly not actually part of your character. Everyone just sucks at communication. Instead of being like, hey, I really think, you know, Vuk repeatedly tell her, call off the wedding. And she's like, I can't tell you. Instead of being like, maybe you should talk to Jordan. Or going to Jordan herself and being like, hey, Vuk is asking me these questions. What do you want to tell him? Do you want to talk to him? Yada, yada, yada. That never happens. And she has this like weird victim complex. She just insists that no one's ever going to help her. That's why she has to do all of this on her own. But there's no evidence she's been betrayed in the past or something, or that like someone said they'd help her and then didn't help her. Like, there's none of that. You just get that she's assuming nobody's going to help her. So she's struggle busing it when it would have been a lot more tangible and impactful if she had like a good example of being let down previously somehow. But there's nothing. There's nothing. In my opinion, the spice was really degrading. And maybe I'm just a prude. I've never really been a fan of dirty talk, but like sometimes it fits in. Everything Vuk said to her, I felt was just really degrading. Like, if a man spoke to me like that, instant turn off, not interested. No. No. And I saw a really interesting TikTok that was talking about like how these types of books are conservative propaganda, and I'm not gonna say I disagree because they made some good points, and I'm just gonna leave it at that. I gave it a 1 star because that's the lowest you can do on Goodreads. I wish I could have given it a 0. Don't read it. He's mean to the cat the whole time. And everyone's like, oh, I love how he loves the cat. He doesn't love the cat. He's a jerk to it. As a palate cleanser, the 4th book I read was Salt and Broom by Sharon Lynn Fisher. It is a Jane Eyre retelling that is paranormal and is kind of centered around the idea of what if Jane Eyre was a witch. It had a lot of good vibes. You know, I don't really think I need to give a synopsis because it's basically Jane Eyre. She's called by Mr. Rochester to Thornfield Hall because there's like something paranormal and magic-y going on instead of her being a governess. But otherwise, like the context and the plot are basically the same. So something that I liked, it was really atmospheric. I liked the vibes. I listened to the audiobook and it was a fun little experience. Mostly because Jane's characterization was super, I don't want to say like comedic, but it was funny because she had a lot of like spunk to her. I don't remember being in the original Jane Eyre. And even though it was a retelling, I was still surprised by where some things went. Sometimes a retelling is like literally beat for beat exactly the story. And sometimes a retelling is just like completely off-roading. Yeah, you were inspired by like a hair of the original character. This I felt had a good middle ground. It had a lot of the bones, but still managed to make its own thing. That being said, unfortunately, I felt like the witchcraft fell flat. The practice was just really shallow. It kind of just boiled down to Jane saying some cute rhymey stuff and boiling dried herbs, and that was it. Which, you know, I guess falls in more realistically with like what witchcraft is in our world. But consequently, it just felt like nothing they ever tried seemed to fail. And realistically, she put some herbs in a tea bag and was like, this is a protection amulet. And then that's like, I'm supposed to believe that it did its job and nothing bad, like nothing happened. She would say 2 rhyming sentences and then, yep, they definitely can't get in the house now. The evil ghost or spirit that they're investigating. It definitely took away a lot of the suspense for me. And then towards the end, you realize, like it's explicitly stated, this took place over a week. Like the original Jane Eyre takes over a much longer time period. So I just couldn't believe that like he actually likes her, and you know, the intensity of their feelings didn't make sense for the actual length of time that the book happened over. Because my feelings were pretty balanced overall, I did give it 3 stars. If the witchcraft had been delved into more deeply, it would have been better. There were a few plot lines that just kind of like, she had a question, she found the answer. That's the end of that plot line. It didn't really change anything about the main story. And then the timeline. I think it should have taken over a longer period of time somehow. Like, even though she was called basically to like be an exterminator, which arguably doesn't take very much time, they could have introduced something to the plot to make it seem more, to let it steep, you know. And the final book that I read in May was The Briar Book of the Dead by A.G. Slatter. So it is a gothic fantasy around deep family secrets, and it's also kind of a paranormal mystery. I really liked it. I have read another book by this author, All the Murmuring Bones, which is set in the same universe, the same world, same time period of that world, except it has to do with mermaids. And this one has to do with, like, just witches and ghosts. So, brief synopsis. Ellie Briar is the first non-witch to be born into her family for generations. The Briar family of witches run the town of Silverton, caring for its inhabitants with their skills in magic. In the usual scheme of things, they would be burnt for their sorcery, but the church has given them a dispensation in return for their protection of the borders of the Darklands, where the much-feared Leech Lords hold sway. Ellie is being trained as a steward, ministering for the town, and warding off the insistent interest of the church. When her grandmother dies suddenly, Ellie's cousin Audra rises to the position of Briar Witch, propelling Ellie into her new role. As she navigates fresh challenges, an unexpected new ability to see and speak to the dead leads her to uncover sinister family secrets, stories of burnings, lost grimoires, and evil spells. Reeling from one revelation to the next, she seeks answers from the long dead and is forced to decide who to trust, as a devastating plot threatens to destroy everything the Briar Witches have sacrificed so much to build. I really liked this. Her world building for this universe, I think, is really immersive and had like a really strong feminist streak, which I enjoy. The spooky vibes were there. I wouldn't say it's a horror. Some people tagged it as horror on Goodreads, and it wasn't like scary. It was like spooky, witchy vibes, you know? The main character was like pretty bold and stubborn, despite the fact that she did honor the like societal and family expectations that were put on her. Usually, I think when it's a balance between like a strong character and what they're expected to do, usually that results in them not doing what they're supposed to be doing. But she still honored her family and her role without letting go of who she is, I felt. Definitely, this is a worthy sister for her other in-universe novels. I'm excited to go ahead and read the other two. There are lots of short stories and novellas, but probably I wouldn't read those until I finish the main novels. So there's 2 more novels, and then another that's coming out next year, actually. So, fun to know. Some things that I did have problems with. The audiobook has several errors. All the Murmuring Bones, I didn't have any problems listening to it, but this one, multiple times, paragraphs or sentences were repeated. And I checked, and it wasn't an issue like with my audiobook player or anything. It was like the actual audiobook, I guess, wasn't reviewed. Which, the books are they're less than 400 pages, so the audiobook's pretty short. Also, and I did kind of feel this way with All the Murmuring Bones a little bit, but it kind of felt like anytime they met a mentor figure, that figure would just like info dump the things that they needed to know. So I was listening, and it felt like this guy has been talking for pages when really it should have been divided up and sprinkled along as like their relationship progressed. Not like love relationship, but like mentor-student relationship. Overall, I give it 4 stars. It wasn't perfect. I did have some quibbly little issues with the book, but I did really enjoy the experience, and I would definitely recommend it to anyone who likes the vibes of what I just described. Now that we're going into June, I have some plans for what I want to be reading. Things that I already have on my Kindle. Little Thieves by Margaret Owen. I don't know anything about it, but the cover page is super cute, and that drew me in. I've seen a few reviews floating around in my recommended that seem to be positive, so that's a good omen. Next, I have the 4 books from the 3 Dark Crowns series by Kendare Blake. I also don't know anything about them, but the cover really pulled me in, and it also seems like people are feeling pretty positive about them. And they give off vibes for books that I usually like. So, fingers crossed that I don't end up hating either of those choices. The other book that I have on here, Steelheart Iron Claws, which is the 3rd book in the God-Kissed Bride series by Evie Marceau. It's pretty smutty. So the first book is about so they live in a world where some people are gods kissed, and they have like an ability, like magic. There's this girl who, for reasons between her father and this heir to a throne, basically her father has to like give her away in marriage, which is fine by her because she hates her dad, but part of the marriage is that her fiance sends his best dude, like his number 1 right-hand man, bodyguard guy, to fetch her, to ride by horseback to this major city. But the catch is, in order to like honor this, I think it was like a folk tale or like a legend or something, she had to be naked the entire time, which like sounds ridiculous. And obviously like feelings arise between her and the bodyguard guy, whose name I think is also Wolf. I read it because I was like, there's no way, like how in the world do they pull this off? And it actually ended up being really interesting, minus some of the weird smut. But, you know, I was really interested in the plot, so I read the 2nd book. And it left off in a really weird place where I thought, there's no way I'm continuing this series. I'm not really interested anymore at this point. Because, I mean, plug your ears if you don't want a spoiler. The 2nd book is kind of like dancing really close to infidelity, which I don't really enjoy. It's one of the reasons I really did not like King of Envy. And it left off at a really weird place, I felt. But when I was scrolling through Kindle Unlimited, the third book popped up, and I was like, you know what? Since it's here, I might as well dive back in and see where it goes. I think one of the reasons that I didn't like how it left off is because it just kind of feels like it's leaving everything open for there being like 50 books or something. So hopefully, I'm hoping this ties it up. It didn't look like there was a fourth book predicted, but I could be wrong. I hope I'm not wrong. I could be wrong. Those are kind of the only books that I have at the top of my list, really. I have a bunch of stuff on my Kindle that I've never read. So sometimes I'll just go through and like see what piques my interest again. My husband's friends are really trying to get me to continue reading the Cosmere books by Brandon Sanderson. I've read, I think, all of the standalone books and then the first Mistborn trilogy. I don't have any problems. It's just like the books that are left, I'm pretty sure are all really, really long, which is fine. I don't have an issue with that exactly, but it's just kind of intimidating. Like, oh, there's going to be 6 books that are all 800 pages. Oh, okay. I told them I would, so I might do one of those. I don't know. I don't really have any issue with his books in particular. I generally do not read male authors, but like his romance sucks. Sunlit Man was like, what in the world? That came out of left field and was kind of creepy. It resolved in an okay way, like the only appropriate way, but I was like, why did this even come to your brain in the first place? That kind of put me off. But all his other standalone books, I didn't really have any issue with. So we'll see. If there's any recommendations for books that you think I would enjoy based off of everything I've said in this video, let me know in the comments. I am open to suggestions. I will be honest, I usually do read things that are on Kindle Unlimited, since I'm paying for the subscription anyways, or books that are on sale for less than $10. When I was a kid, my mom stopped letting me buy books because I would just read them too quickly. So ever since then, I've been pretty big on cheaper library. It was nice talking to you. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.